All right, what is up, guys? It is Uncle Bob, and welcome to the channel. Welcome back, guys. How's it going? We are here for an episode about One Piece, not where we are watching One Piece. This is not one of the watch with me's. This is just me celebrating. I'm gonna be turning the light off, like it has been for this whole last year, since being in this place. For the most part, I kind of got to do these at night. So this is probably a video that's best for the pocket anyway. It's not one that's going to be best for, watching, because there's not going to be any video. There's not going to be anything crazy. It's just me talking about how completing my third year of One Piece was. And I looked it up to see exactly where it started. And it started the journey to year 3 of One Piece for me started at Long Ring Long Land. I had just started the arc. Episode, I think like 207 and 208 were, or something like that, were the first 2 episodes of that little arc. And, 209 was the first episode that I had watched. Starting on Halloween. Which obviously is tomorrow, and I will be watching episode 313 tomorrow. So I will be starting a new year of One Piece on Halloween, as has been tradition every year. But yeah, that's around when that was where I started the year, was at Long Ring Long Land. Then had a little bit of filler in there, and then pretty much went right into Water 7 and then into Enies Lobby, which by location, I get why you would separate the two, but I'm not going to lie. That whole thing felt like just one adventure to me. Like, it was a little different, in the first year of One Piece, because, you got the beginning of One Piece, which is a bunch of little island hops leading to Arlong Park. So all of that feels very segmented, and not just because of the locale changes. Like, everything felt like, because Luffy was in the beginning recruiting a new member everywhere he went, that made how do I put it? Like, that just made everything feel like it was all segmented off. And then same thing into the second year for me, which was mostly Skypiea. I was finishing up Alabasta at first, after year 1, but then as we got into it, or actually no, let me go back, because I forgot. If I'm thinking of the episodes, everything leading up to Alabasta, same kind of deal, actually. You had Chopper, you had Little Garden, and then you had Drum Island. Before that, you had Whiskey Peak. Same thing. Everything was feeling very segmented up. So the last couple years, at least on the schedule I've been watching it on, obviously this is not how everybody else watched it or how everybody consumes it, which I just saw the news that One Piece is only going to be releasing 26 episodes a year from here on out, which obviously for me and my whole purpose behind the schedule that I've got for this does make the Lord a little nervous. That does worry me just a little bit. Just because, my whole thing is wanting to, I do want this series to be done before I get there. Like, listen, if I eventually have to start seasonaling it in like that many years, if it's, bro, I could do it, but I've said it before. I waited for One Piece to get this far, so that way I would never have to stop. Like, that was the whole point of doing that. So, if it were to happen, would it be the worst thing in the world? No. but it really is something I would rather ought not happen, personally. But, it is what it is. And just because I'm dumb and I know the math to it, if they're only going to be releasing 26 episodes a year, that is, that's only a quarter of the year for me. That's like 3 months worth of One Piece that they're going to be doing in a whole year. So, as it stands, it's already going to take me a little bit more than 8 more years just to get up to where it is now. And in those 8 years, there is going to be almost 2 years more worth of content the way that I make it once I get to where basically the anime is right now. So, listen. They still have, Oda still has 10 years to finish One Piece. Please, you can't see my, look, I'll turn the light back. Please. I know I said this would basically be audio only, but please, for the love of God, do not let that be. Please be done. Please be done. It's hard because I am trying to not keep up with One Piece like I used to for years, because I've made this no secret. I've said it. Now I have more than 300 episodes of me watching this up on this channel. I have never made it any secret that when it comes to One Piece, I basically know most of the big events. Honestly, this next one with Thriller Bark, the next arc big arc that's coming up, is actually one of the arcs that I know the least about. And that actually excites me. Obviously, I know Gecko Moira is going to be the bad guy and Luffy's going to beat the bad guy. I know all of that. But as far as anything else, I don't really know anything about that arc. So I'm really excited for it. I really am. Just because it's relatively new. I didn't start watching One Piece until 2022. And I found out about the series in 2003, 2004. So it was almost 20 years from when I heard about the series to when I started watching it. And in that in between, I have had friends talk to me about it. I have had friends spoil everything for me. The internet has spoiled things for me. It was basically like when I eventually went back and watched through Naruto, I had basically known all of the big events, and kind of the same thing with One Piece. What I'm really getting is that interweaving context that makes everything stick, that makes it more than just a compilation of good moments for a YouTube video. That's all I know. I know what happens at Marineford. I know what happened in all of the arcs previously. I know how, things that happen in Whole Cake Island, in Wano. Punk Hazard, not so much. That is one of the Dressrosa I know a lot about. There's arcs that friends have just filled me in on over the years. Things I've seen. I mean, it's part of the reason, seeing as much as I have is what's made what, for those 18 years, always had me thinking, yeah, I am going to watch this one day. I'll get there. It'll just, I don't know when, but I'll get there. And after, almost 20 years of knowing about the series, it seemed like it was time. But, yeah, what I'm getting is a lot of the interweaving context of what makes all of those big moments actually big moments. And I went on that whole tangent and I don't even remember what for. See if I can get it back real quick. Okay, I remember what I was saying. Yeah, I just don't want to be keeping up with like what's been going on ever since, pretty much since since Wano ended. I've kind of been trying to just stay out of it. Like I've heard a little bit here and there about Egghead, but not a lot. Elbaf I've stayed kind of away from. So the newer arcs, like I know they exist, but I'm really, really, really trying to keep myself as fresh on that as I can. But I mean, I guess it really doesn't matter because let's face it, once it comes out what the One Piece is, it's going to be everywhere. Which is why I'm hoping that the actual One Piece item, like whatever the item is, I'm hoping it's almost just like a giant red herring, so that doesn't become the thing that, everyone's like online, like, oh, the One Piece is this, because they can spoil it, but then, I want it to be something where somebody who hasn't watched the show will be like, that's dumb, or that's a weird choice, but something that will make sense internally, for anybody who's there. Because if everyone's going to find out about it, you almost want it to just be special for those who are like in the know. But yeah, Oda has like 10 fucking years to finish the series. It better be over. Oh my God, I would be so upset if it was still going in 10 more years. I would be so upset. But again, if it ever came that I did have to week it, then so be it. Well, actually, no, that would be seasonaling it. Oh, God, that just hurts. I am not, listen, to people who are like actual anime watchers, they probably hear that and they're like, oh, that's great. But for me, like, I don't know, man. I am just like, I like the simplicity of just an episode a week. I know all of the like fillery things you got to kind of do when you do that. So I understand all the benefits to doing it this way as opposed to the other way. So, as long as Toei Animation does good with this and like makes everything as good of quality as it should be and consistently and forever until the series is over, and that's how they want to handle like the rest of the final arc, then you know what? I can be here for it. I can be here for it. But anyway, year 3 of One Piece. It was good. And like I said, the Long Ring, Long Land took place. And I guess we got to kind of see now that I think about it, I guess we got to see a preview of what was coming in Water 7. Because the whole premise of the Davy back fights was that you would lose crew members if you lost the challenges or whatever. So, I guess it's, I guess you really did get a preview of what was to come. And it's weird because I don't know the manga, so I don't know the difference between, what the manga shows and what the anime was showing. So I don't know, like, if all those challenges, because I know there's a lot of anime canon, you could call it, material. So I don't want to say too much on, like, what would, you know what? Let me disregard the manga, actually. I'm going to think about the anime as if all anime canon is anime canon. And whatever, like, obviously not filler, but if it's anime canon, quote unquote, then it's anime canon, and I don't really care about it. So all of those contests existed, whether they existed in the manga or not. But I like how you got to see Robin kind of getting hinted at to be traded off of the ship. And, the crew fought to get her back there. And then you get a bigger moment where the Navy obviously comes a-knocking. And kind of the same thing. Obviously, the crew will do whatever it takes. Because, when it came to the Davy back shit, they didn't let Robin or Chopper stay on that other ship. They negotiated new rules and said crew for crew, we'll bet the rest of our crewmates versus, I think Nami originally just said like, that would have been, I don't know if the Davy back fight includes the captains, so I don't know if Luffy would have been counted. But let's just count them. That would have been Luffy, Nami, Sanji, Zoro, Usopp, the classic five. 5 for 5. I think that's what Nami offered was the I know Wendy's was 4 for 4, not 5 for 5. But she tried to 5 for 5 them. And I think they were like, you bet your whole crew, we'll bet our whole crew. And they just went that route instead. And it was like, all right, whatever you guys say. Whatever tickles your fancy. And I mean, I guess, I guess in real life, people don't always really think deep down sometimes into the decisions that other people make. Because like in this regard, you could argue that, Nami should have just, or not Nami, Robin should have just known better that Luffy and the gang would come after her just by what they did for her on Long Ring Longland. Now, obviously, if Robin didn't get traded in the manga, then that kind of wouldn't happen anyway. But shh. But in general, I still stand by what I said, where people don't always fully grasp the things that sometimes are going on around them in a deeper level. Excuse me. That's not to say that people don't think about things, but I don't think people if you have a friend who is genuinely willing to help you with something small. I know when something big happens, a big thing that, especially people with low self-image and low self-worth, they'll sit there and be like, but you know what? They just helped me with, this thing, but this other thing, that's too big. They already helped me for something small. They won't want to help for something bigger. And the thing is that usually the people who are willing to help you with something smaller are the exact same people who are going to be willing to help you out when it's something bigger. Because it's not about the size of the request. Sometimes, we all live lives. Sometimes it's like, hey, can you help me move? And it's like, I got kids, man. I can't, things like that. But in general, especially when you're young, like all of the Straw Hats are, I need to know how old Frankie is. Because I think, even if we say Brooke is only the age that he died at, I think that would mean that I'm 35. I don't know how old Frankie is. Frankie could be close to my age or maybe a little older. But Brooke and Jinbei, maybe post time skip. I don't know. I don't know these characters' ages. I know that all of them are basically teenagers and kids except for Robin, Frankie, Jinbei, and Brooke. Those are the old heads of the crew. And I know I'm older than Robin because I think she's in her late 20s. So I think I'd be older than her pre and post time skip. Yeah. I don't even know why I said that. See, ADHD gets me distracted. But when you're young, like most of the Straw Hats are, generally, if they're willing to help you with something, they'll be willing to help you with other things. The thing that you have to do, usually, with most normal people, is you have to ask. You have to actually go and ask for help. That's usually thing number one that you have to do. Is you have to actually be willing to extend a hand out and ask for help. I mean, Vivi kind of had the same thing where she kept treating the Straw Hats like, oh, you're not trying to help, like, and Luffy had to punch her in the face and be like, listen, we are trying to do all of this just to help you. Just, like, I don't know if it was exactly ask for help with Vivi, but it was just like one of those things where it's like, listen, you already know we're ride or die, so why are we even wondering about anything else? You're beating around the bush with all of this extra nonsense, all because you don't realize what you got right here. You know, we will help you. And with Robin, it's even more so, because, like, Vivi was a part of the crew, but Robin was a part of the ship. You know, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, part of the crew, a part of the ship, part of the crew, part of the ship. Isn't that what they chant? I think that's what they chant. With Vivi, like, she was there, but she always felt like she was attached. Even before, like, I know the crew was waiting for her, you know, and she said her goodbye and said, no, I can't leave, because she was thinking about it. But she always, when I'm watching it, she never felt like a part of the crew like that. She felt like a fellow companion, but she didn't really feel like she was a part of the crew. And Robin was, because, you know, I mean, she went to Skypiea with him. Like, she already had an entire arc with the group, doing what they do, seeing how they run. And I mean, Long Ring Long Land was also a canon arc, and I guess the same thing. She got to see again how the crew operates. In this one, when it comes to retrieving back their own members. So, you know, it might have been obvious when you're looking at it that Robin should have just asked for Luffy's help. But, you know, unfortunately, human emotions are like that. You know, we all feel things. And, you know, Robin's biggest worry is this Buster call. You know, it's basically a naval bombing run. And that's trouble. That's trouble for everyone, no matter who you are. That's trouble. Well, not everyone, but like anywhere normal that you're going to go in the One Piece world is going to get fucked by that. Like, yeah, there might be certain members, because, like, I'm thinking of, you know, the Straw Hat crew. I think once post time skip hits, other than the presence of an admiral, other than them, which that's a big other than, but I don't really worry about the naval ships firing indiscriminately and that doing something to the Straw Hats. I don't really worry too much about things like that. You know, when it comes to the Straw Hats, it's going to be about, you know, the bigger key figures of anywhere they go, you know, the higher ups, you know, whether it be the military or, you know, when it comes to CP9 and shit, or it's, you know, NL up in Skypiea and it's, you know, the priests and the hierarchy there, you know, all that's always who, I mean, and not just because it's in the end, it's a fucking shonen anime, but just, I get why it's terrifying to Robin, because she was a little girl and she watched everything that she loved all just go up in flame. And then she also watched the Navy light aflame all of the survivors who were fleeing from that Buster call, all for the price of having some sort of forbidden knowledge. You know? And it's like, listen, I don't want to be super tacky and bring this, you know, to being an American and living in the United States. But I mean, when I see things from Donald Trump where he's going into museums and, like, removing certain parts of, you know, our slave history in America, when he was running for 2020, when he lost, when he was running in 2020, I remember there being this speech he gave. I don't know to who it was, but he was talking about wanting to do, like, I think he actually called it patriotic education. And that is the exact fear I got from this, because it's, especially like, it's not just in a story, when in the real world there's becoming knowledge that it's not necessarily right now yet being hidden away, but when it's like, you know what, this doesn't put us in a good light. This doesn't give everybody the warm tinglies, so maybe we shouldn't have that up. That is already like starting to tread down a very slippery slope. These are things that need to be at the forefront of our nation's collective minds. Not exactly like hanging our hats on it. We're especially when we're linking it to One Piece. It's not something that you don't use the past to shackle yourself. You're not shackled to it, but you gotta keep score. Like, you gotta keep score appropriately. When you have, let's just look at slavery in America. Let's just look at black people in America. When you, hold on one second. All right, sorry about that. It's so funny for me to be adjusting my phone when we all know damn well no one can see anything anyway. Hold on, I'm gonna roll down my window a bit because my roommate is gonna be taking his dogs on a walk, so I want to make sure my daughter's up, I can hear. But no, when you look at just slavery here in America and, black people's place in American history, they started being brought over, I believe, 1619, a year after the first settlers arrived in the New World. A year later, they started bringing in slave labor. So black people were either slaves or moved on to being second-class citizens until, if we have to draw a hard line, I would draw it at the year 1970, when I believe is the year that redlining legally, officially, on the books. Sorry, I'm trying to hear if that's my roommate's dog's barking that much. If we have to draw a hard line, I feel like in 1970, when redlining was made illegal, I feel like, for the idea of, okay, you are no longer officially second-class citizens. When you have that sort of like legal restriction and like binding apparatus around you, this oppressiveness all around you for 351 years, that's a long time. And I think people need to think about how long that is when they also think about what sort of timetables they're looking at for how something's going to get fixed. Because if you're not taking proper account of score, you're going to expect things that are wildly out of question. People right now are talking about, white people all over social media. All the racists are talking about black fatigue. And it's like, listen, these people were, if we're thinking of that 351 years, we are, hold on, is that 1 second? All right, sorry, that was like 5-10 minutes. But at least what I remember that I was saying was that, if you're not willing to just take proper account for how things are, when you're thinking about that 351 years, well, since 1970, it's been 55 years. Now, realistically, would you expect, unless by any given society, which is not usually how people adjust to change ever, but do you think a problem that has existed for 351 years is going to be solved in 55? No. But there's a lot of people that just by the fact of the not wanting to take proper account, it gives you a warped view on how things should be now. And obviously, when we connect it back to One Piece, it's much different because this is a fantastical world and a fantastical setting. But Robin's already talked about there being an entire time period that nobody knows anything about. You know what I mean? That's what the archaeologists of Ohara studying. That's the what do they call it? The void century, or the empty century, the void century, the missing 100 years, whatever you want to call it. Just their pursuit of this knowledge of what happened is so damning that not only will you have the entire apparatus that you had for research and, study, all of that destroyed, but also any civilians, just in case one of them might know something, blow that shit up too. And it's just, the control of knowledge is so fucked. And the thing is that the knowledge is always there. It's always accessible. It's just about what any sort of power group does in face of it. Most, Western style democracies, most of them, we'll see how it goes in the US, but you can know and study and research into a lot of times, as with all societies, not so grand beginnings. Because, let's face it, any look backwards into human history, our species was a lot more violent. Our capacity for violence is higher now with more technology and bigger death counts, just bigger populations, everything is bigger. So yes, the number is more, but humans were just constantly warring and fighting with each other all the time. And, a lot of times because of that, the ways that a lot of our nations got themselves started was by, maybe getting their hands dirty a little bit. Sometimes maybe a little dirtier than anyone's hands really should be. But you account for that and you acknowledge it, so that way you know how to move forward. Clearly in the One Piece world, what we have is a governing system that is already in the apex full control of that information. And whatever it is that they want hidden, they want it hidden. They don't want anyone knowing about it. There is no method with the world government in One Piece there's no method to properly scorekeep the way that you want to be able to in any society. It doesn't matter if it's global. If eventually the world in the real world is under one world government, which I do see as an inevitability in 2,000 years if we're still around. I see that as being an inevitability, but I'm sure there's going to be a thing there where it's the way it started may not have been so good, but you have to be able to question it. You have to be able to look at the less favorable sides of things, just to be able to move correctly throughout the world. Because if not, you got a bunch of people who are, believing fake news and going on with their life as if this alternate reality is just what it is. And that's dangerous, because then you get people, it's the literal matrix. You get people comfortable to the delusion. And it's just, It's fucked, and it's fucked to see it happening both in the real world and in a fictional world. So I'm very interested to see in what everything revolving around that is. I don't even remember how I snaked my way onto this topic. That's hilarious. Because I've barely even talked. I've talked so much more about One Piece I've watched as compared to what I like just finished watching. One thing I know, to cut over, to end one conversation, cut, splice, move to the next thing, is I have finally seen Luffy as the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. Because before, to me, one of my complaints with him is that, he's good at dealing with people, but other than having like some weird hypnotic seeing through people ability that allows him to befriend and make allies of people, aside from that, Luffy has always felt to me like he was the captain of the ship because he was the strongest and because he was the one to gather them. But there wasn't really a lot that made me feel like Luffy was like a captain. Like, he was the captain, no doubt, but I just never felt it from him. And I'm trying to pick a moment, because I feel like the moment that everybody would go to, if certain people were to agree with me, I feel like the moment that everybody would pick as to where that changes was when he's standing there, him and the Straw Hats are standing there facing off against CP9, and he tells Usopp to shoot the flag. That could be it, but I don't know. For me, it feels actually like the moment where I first felt that was when, after his first failed battle with Rob Lucci, and he got himself wedged in between some buildings, and Nami came and told her that, Jesus Christ, I've been talking for so long, I'm starting to. Nami came over and told him that Robin was planning on sacrificing herself to the world government because they're basically using the safety of the crew as a leverage point against her. Listen, you come with us, you do what we say, we'll let the Straw Hats leave here. And, Robin already had or has the PTSD of a Buster call hanging over her head. And after having an adventure with the crew, the last thing she wants to do is put this newfound family in any sort of real danger. And just knowing that sacrifice, when Luffy finally broke through the buildings that he was sandwiched in between, and basically was finally like, fuck it, I've had enough. Because it felt like he was going after Robin, but it felt like he was still kind of moving in a very Luffy-esque way about it. But he saw Robin. Robin was like, I'm leaving. I'm never coming back. Right before he fought Lucci. Fights Lucci, gets kicked away. It still kind of felt like he was being the same Luffy who was stuck in what was the snake's name? I can't remember the snake's name in Skypiea. But it still felt like he was stuck in the snake. He felt like the same kid. But when Nami revealed that news, that felt like the moment where he kind of locked in as a captain. He had already chased away Usopp. Because, yeah, Usopp was going through his own sort of turmoil. But, and I said this before, I find it funny that I know it happens later, but everybody says, oh, on Whole Cake Island, if Zoro would have seen Sanji do that, kick Luffy the way that he did, there would be no more Sanji. And it's like, no, that's not how it would go. Because it would go kind of the same way that it did with Nami, funnily enough. Where, Nami tried swaying Luffy one way or the other, and Luffy just told her, shut up. And, if Zoro would have been there, I feel like what would have happened is Sanji would have kicked Luffy, and Zoro would have grabbed all of his swords, unsheathed them, and Luffy would have said, stand down. And that would have been the end of it. But, that's not what happened when him and Usopp were starting their fight. And I think it's because, Sanji was right to check him. Because Usopp was clearly going through something, and it's not like Luffy wasn't going through it either. Luffy was upset. We just watched him put the Mary down. He was very clearly distraught by it. It was not something he wanted to do. And, Usopp was in his own feelings, which, that's a demon that he has to face. But, when you're the captain, you're the captain. You're the guy who's supposed to hold everyone together. And, if Usopp wanted to leave on his own accord, then, then it is what it is. But he was in this struggle zone of not knowing what he wanted to do. And when Luffy's response was, well, if you don't like it, you can just leave. Like, that's the sort of callousness that if you're going to be a real leader, you can't really do. You can't really have that attitude. Because what that's going to do is give that other person every incentive and every reason for them to leave, to leave. You just gave them the justification they needed. You're not supposed to, you don't, when you're a leader, want to lash out emotionally like that. And Sanji gave him a foot to his fucking face for it and told him, like, watch your mouth. But, at that point, it was already too late because, Luffy realized it and he was like, yeah, you know what? I didn't mean that. But once you strike that wound, anything else after that just feels like pandering. So it was already too late. And, he mismanaged Usopp leaving. And, it felt like now he found out that, up to this point, as far as he knows, he's lost now 2 crewmates just on this island. 2 of his crewmates are gone. And finds out that one of them, all that they were doing was putting their head on the guillotine for them. And Luffy wasn't having it at that point. At that point, that was it. He knew what he was going to do, and that was going to be to rescue Robin. Now, he might die afterwards, but he was going to rescue her. And, that's exactly what he ended up doing. And, yeah, I would say that the moment where he bursted through the buildings, like, that's when it felt like he was really like, oh, Captain, my captain. He had officially locked in, like, I've lost 2 crewmates. I have a chance to get one back right now. Let's go. And, boarded that sea train and went through every obstacle in his path in order to get to her. And, Robin's backstory, a little cliche. I've seen enough anime and enough fiction to where that wasn't, none of that was the most surprising, but but yeah, no. That felt like a big moment for Luffy. And I finally now do see him as the proper leader of the crew and not just the leader in the general, I'm the main character, I started the crew sort of. Now I see him as the actual driving force behind what the group is doing. And not just in, they're following him in his manic antics sort of way, but like in a real, when he makes a decision, the crew follows. Captain's orders. That was the feeling that I was waiting for. And I mean, when 274 still one of my favorite episodes I've seen, where Luffy's already standing there and he's telling Robin, like, listen, if you want to die, then why don't you just come down here and we go all die? Because there's a good chance that we're about to all fucking get killed out here anyway. So if you're gonna die anyway, then why not do it down here? Because that's already a 50-50 on where our life is headed right now. So if you're gonna do it with us. And that's, it's not comparable by like what they were going through because it's different struggles. But that is more the approach that Usopp needed. Usopp was conflating his worth with the ship's worth. And if the ship can be just thrown away because it can't do its function anymore, then what's to stop them from throwing Usopp away? And it's like, that is a moment where Luffy needs to be like, listen, no one's happy about the ship. And it sucks. And I know the Mary means a lot to you. But it can't go any further. That's the end of the line. You are not the going Mary. You are our friend. The Mary is our friend too, but she is also a ship. And, if our friend can't continue anymore, cannot, then we have to say goodbye. But Usopp, are you stopping? Is this where you're going to stop? What's stopping you? Because if I need to punch it in the face, whatever it is that's stopping you, I'll punch it in the face right now. And obviously, that's not exactly what Luffy would say, but like just anything regarding an approach where he's reassuring Usopp of his worth and position on the crew. I mean, Sanji had that exact same advice for him during the actual conflict. Zoro's about to take on Kaku in earnest. Sanji's about to fight Jabra. Or no, maybe he had just knocked the shit out of him. Or maybe that was just post the fight that both of them had. Maybe Jabra and Kaku had just gotten knocked out. I don't remember exactly the placement there. But Usopp was sitting there worried that, like him not being able to fight against, not being able to fight against monsters like Kaku and Jabra. And, Sanji reassured him, was like, listen, do what you do. As long as you do what you do, we'll get Robin back. And it's like, that's all that needed to happen. Just some sort of reassurance. Sanji kind of gave it to him. Zoro didn't give him any sort of reassurance, But I like that Zoro's attitude a lot of the times wasn't like, I like how he still treated Usopp, they just acted with each other the way they normally acted. There wasn't really any difference in their dynamic. I don't think Zoro's going to let him back on without an apology. But, in the whole task of saving Robin, you know, I mean, like, to me, the best line that he said to him was just, right before they all did the walk up to face off against CP9 in that legendary 274. Zoro's just like, everybody knows who he is. So Zoro's just like, hey, Soge King, can you get up? Like, just, he's still being included in with whatever they're doing. And it's not assurance in the way that most people think of it, the way that, the way that most people need to get it. Zoro was still in his way giving it. And I enjoyed a lot of the crew's dynamics over this last year. I do feel like the group is going to be even more like forged under fire. Like, they are going to be closer as a unit than they were before this. And I think that's great. I'm really glad, and I've talked about it before. My favorite aspect of this show is the fact that you really feel like everyone's doing something. It may not be a big something all the time, but it's more just the fact that, like, they're doing something. It could just be little cutaways to them running through a city and, running from, let's just say, the city's under cannon fire and they're just running around trying not to die. Even that, when I'm thinking of, I love Dragon Ball, but what's everyone else doing while the fight's going on? They're standing in the background with their arms crossed. Now, granted, that's because a lot of it comes from the martial arts Budokai tournaments and that vibe being what stays throughout. But I do like having this kind of structure as well, where everyone's just moving. Everyone's doing something. The crews are interacting with each other. Zoro couldn't finish his fight until he got Usopp unhandcuffed from him. And that unhandcuffing had to be done by Chopper, who had to finish his fight before he could, like, I like that there's so many different things going on with so many different people at all times. I really like this last year of One Piece. And I mean, I talked about a lot, like half as much, about not just this last year, but also how it kind of broadens how I view the past episodes. Because, now everything feels bigger in scope. Everything seems bigger in scale. The series opens up with Zoro fighting with some guy who just hits him with a pocket knife and is like, fuck out of my face. I like your guts though, kid. I like your chutzpah. So come find me sometime. And I like that, that's the kind of scale that you're being shown. But then you also get, before all of this, you had the group encounter Aokiji, who was basically, to our crew, he was untouchable. So it does show that there is this whole world of people, because I don't think if Zoro, if Zoro fought Mihawk now, like, Mihawk would maybe use, like, what, like a military combat knife. Like, he'd upgrade knife size. Like, that's about it. He still wouldn't need to use an actual sword. So it's like, you see there's this whole world that they can't get to yet. And what I like is that ever since leaving, when it was the East Blue, it felt like Luffy dog walked everything in there. But once they hit the Grand Line, it really has felt like Luffy has had to punch a bit above his weight. And it feels like it feels like it's always this last little oomph factor he gets that gets him to where he needs to be. But he does just feel like he's clawing at straw, and he's still managing to overcome what's being in front of him. Like he's fallen off the ledge and he's like clawing at it, but he somehow, some way manages to claw just the right spot and get himself up. And yeah, he's punching above his weight in a way that I don't know when. Well, actually, it would probably be Marineford. That would probably be the moment. I feel like Luffy is like, he is going to get swallowed up by the sea, metaphorically speaking. I'm feeling like he's punching above his weight and winning fights that he kind of normally shouldn't win, and is managing to do it in the end with some gutso. But just knowing that, it's basically Punk Hazard, and then the crew gets separated, and then we start Marineford, it really feels like that's going to be the spot where everything's going to come crashing down on Luffy. And not just because I know that Ace dies. It's just that it feels like Crocodile, he barely won. It was only at the end that he finally had this moment where he just blasted him through. But everything else was him still also getting his ass beat quite a bit. NL, he was immune to his powers, and Luffy was still having a hard time overcoming him. And he was immune to his powers. That's fucked. So it still felt like he barely came up on top on that. Lucci was besting him in every way, shape, and form for the longest time. No matter what, like, he pulled out gear third and couldn't set him down. It had to be through war of attrition. And it just feels like, yeah, we have one more arc villain that we can probably best still doing that same thing. And then it feels like everything is going to have to come crashing down. He is going to venture into a pond with too big a fish, because as much as I love him, he seems like he's barely winning these. And I like it. I like the grit that comes with that. But I feel like that has to come with a moment where he gets swallowed up. And I guess it makes sense that Wano is kind of the arc in the New World that does the opposite, where when that same strength comes to envelop him again, he blasts through. So I'm excited, but we'll see how it is. Till then, guys, peace.